So welcome to our presentation about YaST and AutoYaST. My name is Thomas Göttlicher. I'm Technical Project Manager and I've been working for SUSE for 8.5 years.
My name is Jiří Schrein. I'm also Project Manager, being with SUSE for more than 14 years. And actually I've been involved with YaST and AutoYaST for all the time. Since we would like to keep the session interactive, if you have at any point of time any question, please just raise your hand and ask the question immediately, and we will do our best to give you the answer for the question.
Our session has two parts. So the first part will be about YaST, and the second part will be about AutoYaST, and Jiří will explain you all the details about the AutoYaST. Let's start with the first part about YaST. Who in this room knows already YaST? So please raise your hands. So have you used it more often than once? Okay. So my question is, if you set up some services, do you use YaST every time you change any minor setting? Or do you use YaST to have a template for your configuration files and hand tweak them later on with your favorite editor? So how do you do that?
Sometimes if you have like a service that you've never used before, YaST is really good to at least give you the idea of what configuration files to use.
Yeah, so you have both options. And if you set up things with YaST, and then after that, use your editor and change some settings in your configuration files, YaST will not change that or override that. So YaST will not eat your configuration files for breakfast. So you're safe. You can set it up using YaST and then hand tweak. And if you start YaST again, it will use these settings. Or if it's a really complicated setup you did manually, that could be a reason why you want to do it manually, then YaST will warn you and say, well, I don't exactly know what all these configuration settings mean. If you continue, things might be lost. But that's all corner cases. YaST normally knows about the configuration files, and it will not silently override things. This talk is about secrets or hidden features or aspects of YaST that are not that well known. And I want to start with one module which is very helpful. That's the Security Center and the Hardening module. It looks like this. So you have multiple options where you can tweak your security relevant settings. So for example, if you can remotely connect to your X server, or if your SUSE Linux Enterprise Server accepts emails from other servers. You also can tweak the password settings. How many days are passwords valid? When does a user have to change his password? Well, my personal opinion on that is, don't ask them to change the passwords too often, because that will make them work around the process, write their passwords down on yellow sticky notes, and that will not make your environment safe. If you are interested more deeply in hardening and securing your Linux Enterprise Server, then there's another talk about that specific topic, and this talk is going on right now. So the bad news is you're in the wrong room. The good news is the same session about security will be repeated tomorrow, so you can stay here. So that was one of the modules I wanted to present. Let's go to one use case or one scenario which is not that often, because YaST normally behaves correctly. Or always. YaST is always right. But sometimes YaST behaves in a different way than you expect YaST to behave. Then you want to find out what's going on. So you can enable debugging mode by setting an environment variable debug equals y2 debug equals 1 and run YaST. And by that, a lot of information, a lot of log information will be written. And when I say a lot, it's really a lot. So you don't want to enable that by default. All that information ends up in var log YaST2 y2 log. And that's where you can find a lot of information. By the way, as you're taking pictures, we will also provide you the slides afterwards. There's a lot of content in these slides, a lot of stuff you want to look up later on. And it's perfectly fine to take pictures, but just as a side note, we will provide the slide decks to you. Another way is the YaST2 debugger. That's a new feature in SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 12. It's so hard to not say the abbreviation. As you heard earlier on at the keynote, even Niels is struggling with that. So SLES, or SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 12 Service Pack 2, has the new feature that there's a debugger. You can set y2 debugger to 1, and then you will have a debugger window. No need to read it, but if you're a Ruby expert and want to play around with that or do some debugging on that, that's a new feature. You can try it out. I guess you're not interested in debugging. You have to do it, but there's cooler features. So there's a lot of hotkeys. Who knows some of these shortcuts? Are there any people know? Okay, Peter knows everything. Yeah, almost everything. Yeah.
Okay. The other one that I know is the F9, F10, OK.
Yeah. So even those are new to Peter. There's Control-Shift-Alt+X that opens an Xterm window. So if you're in the installation system, that's this installation wizard where you select the partitioning setup or the packages you want to install on your server. If you want to have an Xterm window in this system, you press that combination and you will get a window where you can copy over files to a different host using SCP or so. Then there's Shift F7 that's turning on or off the debugging mode. That's equivalent to the y2 debug environment variable. If you want to create documentation for users or want to file a bug report and want to attach a screenshot, then the print screen button is very helpful to you. It will ask you, it will show a file save dialog and will ask you where to save the screenshot. Shift F8 will allow you to save logs, and it will not only save one single log file, but it will create a tarball with a lot of debugging information. So in case you want to open an issue, file a bug report, which is related to YaST, please attach that information. That makes the life of our engineers way easier, so they can help you even faster. Otherwise, they will probably ask back for these bugs, for these log information. So if it's not really obvious what's wrong, please attach that information. Then we have the macro recorder, Control-Shift-Alt+M or +P. I will come to the macro recorder later on, but you can right now memorize the key combination. I will ask you later on, just as a quick test. And we have the style sheet editor, Control-Shift+S, Alt+S, and that's about theming support. Are there any questions about the hotkeys so far? Yeah, there's one in the front.
Do they work in the ncurses as well?
Which ones are? Most of them work. So Xterm will not work. The macro recorder will work. Style sheet editor will not work. And the save logs should also work.
I think that the print screens will not work.
Yeah. And yeah, there was a question by Scott.
When I forget these in about 15 minutes, where do I look them up?
So if you forget about these, you can ask me. So I will be around all the week, but you might be interested in that if you can memorize it for a week and will forget about it later on, you can have a look at the slide deck. So that might be a very good resource. And it's also somewhere documented, but you know about somewhere that's hard to find. But the slide deck is, I think, the best approach to find it. Question by you?
I didn't hear his question, but you were saying some work and some don't work is related to what?
Could you repeat your question, please?
His question, I couldn't hear it. So when you gave the answer that this works and that doesn't work,
yeah,
I didn't know what you were referring to.
So the question was, YaST has different user interfaces. So it has a graphical user interface, and it also has a text interface. And the question was, do these key combinations work in both, in the text and the graphics interface? And some of them work in both. So that was the question we were just answering.
Okay.
Yeah, so if something is unclear, please ask, please interrupt us. And yeah, we are very happy having a interactive presentation here. So the theme, the port, is about the graphical user interface. So it allows you to define the look and feel of the YaST user interface in a way like with CSS style sheets. So if you're familiar to web programming, then this will look very easy to you. And you might want to use it if you want to adapt the look and feel to your corporate design, or if you have vision impaired users and want to increase the font size or have more contrast, then you can also tweak these settings. There's two files. One defines how the installation workflow looks like. So this installation system, where you have the wizard, where you define which packages to install, how the partitioning looks like. That's installation.qss. And then there's also style.qss, which defines how YaST looks like in the running system. So you can adapt these files, or you could also pass in an environment variable a customized file and then make YaST look differently. I want to show you how that looks like. There's a question?
How would you change these settings for new installation?
So So if you want to change it for a new installation, you could rebuild the installation media, but that's not the best approach. It's a tricky question. Yeah, it's good that you're asking that question.
I would like, do you ask how to theme the installation or the system after being installed?
No, I mean, it's for the first installation, because you cannot change the media, then you break the signatures.
Yeah, then I think that the best you can do is to use driver update, which is something Thomas will talk about in a few moments.
Yeah, that's a good approach. Yeah, I will come to that use case as an example when I present the driver update feature. So how does that look like? So this is how YaST looks like in the running system. And with this key combination Control, Alt, Shift, plus S, you will get a style sheet editor where you have all the options to change font size, font color, border size, border style. So you can change the look and feel. And if you press apply, it might look like that. So you have a lot of control over the look and feel. We were talking about the graphical user interface and the text interface and the differences. So my question to you is, do you think it's also possible to change the style of the text interface? Who thinks it's possible? So people who were raising their hands were right. So it's even possible to change the look and feel of the text interface. So there's a configuration file, etc sysconfig YaST2, and there's an environment there's a configuration setting, and you can, for example, set it to mono, and then YaST will look like that. And there's even an option to set it to Braille. That's this Braille line on the keyboard for vision or for blind people. And then these these frames or these borders will be removed, so they are not confused by weird borders on the Braille line. Just as a side note, one of our female engineers came up with a girly theme in pink, so it's possible to style everything. So, and now for the driver update. That's maybe the solution to your question. You want to change things in the installation system, adding different theming. So you want to add some packages to that installation system. How does that work? You need the package you want to have added to your installation system, meaning the tweaked configuration for the UI. Have that packaged as an RPM, upload it to one web server. And additionally, you need to create a file. It's a plain ASCII file with lines like DUD equals, and then reference all the packages you want to be added to your installation system. That file you will also put on your web server, and you specify in the boot prompt info equals, and then a reference to that file, to that ASCII file, and then the installation system will retrieve these packages. If they are not signed by a valid key, it will not trust them automatically, but will ask you if that's okay, if that package is okay. Yeah, question?
Can you make it not ask you that question?
You can pass a parameter, you can pass a parameter insecure here, and that's exactly what it means. It's insecure, so I would not recommend to do that, but if you want to do that, it's up to you, so it will not ask you back, but just accept unsigned packages.
That would probably mean for all the packages, right?
Yeah. So if someone changes your package on the web server, something's going to happen. But that's why this option is called insecure. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And then, is that an approach that could work for you?
Well, then you would have to create an RPM that
Yeah.
has a script that does whatever change to the configuration file.
Yeah, that's how you would do it. Then I want to present the automated installer update. That's also about changes to the installation system, but from a different perspective. So with this driver update, it's more like you need to adapt it to your needs. For example, you have a special hardware and want to add some packages, or you have special requirements to your look and feel, and you have special requirements. And for this is, okay, we have some bug we want to fix in the installation system, and we as SUSE want you to have the opportunity to have the latest software on the installation system. So that's the driver, that's the automated installer update. So there's then a repository with all the updates, and at the boot prompt, if you set sorry, I confused the slides. So in this, I think that's
it's missing in this slide.
I think that's the is that the old slides?
It should be the new ones.
Sorry about that. So let me briefly run you through these slides. So when you want to have updates in your installation system, you can have a repository, or we have a repository with the latest updates.
You are showing the old slides.
Yeah, and the installation system will automatically grab these slides, these packages from that location. And in case that you are not connected to the internet and have a SMT server running, then make sure that you mirror the right repositories so you also have the installer updates. The next feature is about the remote installation. So there's cases you don't want to carry around your DVDs with you, but you want to have the installation source somewhere, for example, at a web server, and don't want to play disk jockey. And this feature is also important if you want to set up an Auto YaST environment. So if you are more interested in the second part of this presentation and came here because of the Auto YaST part, this is also the fundamentals for the second part. So you can install from a remote location. So you have to put all the repositories on a web server, for example, and you can pass to the command prompt, to the boot prompt, and parameter install equals and the location. And if you don't want to have DHCP set assigning your machine an IP address, you can also specify the IP address and the net mask. Other questions regarding the remote installation? There's a different kind of, another question.
In the past, it's not been terribly easy to do authenticated FTP.
Mm-hmm.
Is that improving or not really considered?
So I'm not aware that there's been some changes in this area, but I wasn't also not aware that there's, it's not convenient to use authenticated FTP access. So if you could just report that to us, and you just did, I will talk to the engineers and ask them if there's some approaches going on there, and will tell them that it's not convenient and they can consider to change that. But I wasn't aware that it's an issue. Maybe in the next version. Thanks for your feedback. A different kind of remote installation is when you want to have the display somewhere else. Imagine you have your data center where it is AC, it's pretty cold, it's very loud, and you don't like to be there. So you start the installation there and you want to leave, go back to your office where it's comfortable, where you can have your cup of coffee and chat to your colleagues while you monitor the installation. Then you want to have the display somewhere else in your office. Then you can use VNC or SSH, which tunnels the XX connection. That means you will supply a parameter VNC equals 1 and a password, or SSH equals 1, and then the installation will automatically go over the network. So you have to provide a password. What will happen if you don't provide a password? Any ideas? No, it will not just connect. It will ask you for a password. And if the password is too short, it will ask you again. So it's safe. So it will not just do the insecure way. So you provide the password, you press enter, and as soon as you can connect to that machine, it will show you the IP address and how to connect. And then you can go back to your office and be in a comfortable environment. And yeah, Scott, there's a...
Does that fire out the stock XANC server on the server side that we're using?
Yeah, so it starts an X server on the machine you are going to install. It tells you how to connect. And then you can go to your office, use a VNC viewer, connect to that machine you're about to install. A new feature in SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 12 as a Service Pack 2 is system roles. So you can assign, or there are predefined roles for systems, and depending on that, you have partitioning or software selection predefined. So there are rules like roles like standard system or VM hosts, and have based on that different settings. In the future, there will be more parts of configuration which will be covered, so there will be more besides software selection and partitioning. It's a new feature. And as a last one, I want to present the macro recorder. Who still remembers the key combinations? Is it that why you were asking how you can look up the key combinations? So
Control, Shift, Alt, M, and then P.
Perfect. Congratulations. Yeah, that's correct. And the macro recorder is a recorder for user interaction. And it does it in a very clever way. So it not just records the coordinations where a user clicked, but it tries to, or it records the logical action, like the OK button was clicked, or in this input field, this value was inserted. By that, you can record some interaction on the text interface, and then play it back on the graphical user interface, or the other way around. It can be used by power users, by users who want to automate certain workflows. And I want to show you how that works. So you run your YaST module, you press the key combination you correctly repeated, Alt, Control, Shift plus M. A file save dialog will ask you where to save the recorded macro. Then you click enter values, change settings or whatever. And when you're done, you press the same combination again. It will show you that macro recording done. And then you have a recorded macro. The next step is you want to play that macro. And for that, you will press Alt, Control, Shift plus P when you are in that YaST module, or you can also run it from the command line by adding the -- macro option and providing the file name of that macro file. So it's a very powerful feature. It can do a lot for you, but it's for sure not a substitution for Auto YaST. So Jirsi will tell you more about Auto YaST, and that's why I will hand over to you. One word, you can tell me next slide.
Okay, so at the beginning of the presentation, Thomas asked you how many of you have already used YaST. So how many of you used YaST to install system? Yeah. And how many of you used it to install 10, 20 or more systems? Really YaST? I mean YaST. Yeah. Okay, so AutoYaST is our tool which should help you if you need to install a set of system and you need to do it quickly. It's basically it's a system which is based on standard YaST and which allows to deploy a new system in a matter of minutes, maybe less than 10 minutes, maybe more, depending on how huge the system should be. And all this happens except the initiation of the process completely uninteractively. So, in which cases will YaST help you? Will AutoYaST help you? It will help you when the Linux is your primary or ideally only operating system on a specific machine, and it allows you that you can deploy the system on demand when you need it. You go and deploy a new system. It's very useful if you are dealing with various different systems. And it does not only necessarily mean different hardware, but it can only mean different hardware platforms. With AutoYaST, you can, with the same ease, deploy anything from ARM device through a regular x86 PC to IBM's or other mainframes. It is also very useful if the requirements are changing constantly. You need to adjust the systems you are deploying by adding yet another package. You only need to adjust the AutoYaST profile, which I will talk about later, add the package to the list to be installed, and then you can repeat the process on the machines or on new machines. As I said, it's very useful if you have varying hardware, be it platforms, be it just different configuration of the same platform, and it doesn't deploying the machine at the end when you have everything set up doesn't require much knowledge. It has limitation. It's only useful for the SUSE systems, unlike some other methods, like for example using system imaging. Deploying images is another method how you can deploy machines massively. It allows you. However, it has the limitations. You first need to prepare an image and then you dump it to the system. This means that if you have various systems, and be it different hardware configuration or different software configuration, you need to have a different set of images which you deploy, and they simply cannot share the configuration. Also, if you want to change anything in the systems, what you need to do is to build a new image or new set of images and then deploy the image again. Another disadvantage is of using images is if you want to install a system fully patched with the most recent updates, AutoYaST can automatically take the most recent packages, while with imaging you need again the manual step of rebuilding the image. Then, as another option, we have the SUSE Manager. I intentionally will not talk about SUSE Manager here because if you want to learn more about it, you can visit our colleagues in the technology lab, or there are many sessions about SUSE Manager here during SUSECON. So at the end of the presentation, we will give you a reference to such session. So if you want to utilize AutoYaST, what you need to do? Many of the steps which I list here are not mandatory. It depends on how much level of automation you want to have. The first one which I will talk about is creating the installation server for AutoYaST. The installation server will serve you to provide the packages instead of the physical media. There may be various reasons to use installation server on your local network. One of them is what Thomas already mentioned, that you may want to avoid swapping the CDs during installation, which is quite natural as it's supposed to be not interactive. Another advantage is that nowadays, according to my experience, installation over local network is usually faster than reading the stuff from a DVD. So what you need to set up an installation server, you need basically any server or any, be it physical or virtual, which is capable of running SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. The only additional requirement on top of the system's requirements is that you need a disk space which will hold all the packages from the media of the product you want to install. The exact amount of the disk space simply depends on how many products you want to be able to install from a single server. From the software requirements, you need, or the easiest way is to have an Apache web server. It's perhaps the easiest option to configure. From my experience, I prefer it over the other options. However, you are definitely not limited to this one. You can use many of common communication protocols like FTP. You can use NFS. You can use Samba. When it comes to HTTP or FTP, you can use the plain version or encrypted. It's fully up to you. Additionally, you are not even limited to use Linux. If you have this service running on a Windows server in your infrastructure or any other operating system, you just can use it. How many people who are interested in security do we have in this room now? Okay, so you will probably not really like the next slide, because one thing that you usually forget is if you are setting the service is to create the necessary holes in the firewall. So it's up to you whether you disable the firewall completely for the time you install the systems from the server, or just create the necessary holes. Here I list several services. The list which you need clearly depends on the installation protocol which you use. So you need only one of HTTP or HTTPS or possibly FTP or whatever you prefer. The other ones, TFTP and DHCPD, are listed for the case when you want to boot from this server via network. This is something I will come to later. Obviously, YaST has a firewall module which can configure all aspects of the firewall on SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. And if you are not familiar with the firewall setup, it's really a matter of several clicks to open the necessary ports. Even for configuring the installation server, YaST has its module, which will install and configure the Apache web server, or depending on what you select, FTP or Samba server. And it will help you to transfer the installation media to the system, so that once you do it and wait some minutes until the contents of the DVD is copied to your hard disk, your installation server will be ready, and you can just go and verify it, whether it works. The easiest way, especially if you are going via HTTP, is to use your web browser and put the appropriate URL of the media on the web and see that you can list its contents. Some of the servers forbid listing of directories in their configuration, so in this case, just check it whether, for example, the README file is available or not, and you will find out. And once you have this ready, you are able to trigger the installation via network. I think Thomas already showed this screen to you. Maybe it was in different version. So you have two options. One of the options is here. You can see the you can see the F4 keyword where you can select the installation. So installation media, or you can use a kernel parameter, which looks like this way. So install and URL of the installation media. At the end of the path, there is the DVD one. If the media is spread over multiple CDs or DVDs, always point to the first one, and YaST as well as AutoYaST know where they find the other ones. It relies on the network configuration, so as long as you have the DHCP server in your network, it will work out of the box. If you don't, you need to configure the network manually, which you can do best via the kernel command line. Here you can see the options, host IP and netmask, configuring the basic network settings. And you also have the gateway, just in case your server is not in your local network. If you omit this and the network cannot be automatically configured, you will be asked about the network settings. The most crucial part of AutoYaST is to prepare the AutoYaST profile, which I already mentioned. AutoYaST profile is, say, a description what the system after installation should look like. So it contains all the information, which packages should be installed, how the disk should be partitioned, which services should be configured during the installation. Simply almost everything that you can configure with YaST can be also configured with AutoYaST and be included in the AutoYaST profile. How to create the profile? At least if you are doing it for the first time and already have a SUSE machine installed, the easiest thing is to install the AutoYaST module for YaST and clone your system's configuration. If you start the AutoYaST module, it looks like you see in the screen, and you can create a reference profile according to your machine, which will take some time to collect all the information and then store it into a file. As you can see, it lists all the YaST modules, so you can use this module even in order to adjust some of the settings to be different than what you read from your system. The AutoYaST profile, once you save it, it's a plain text XML file. If you don't like the graphical clickable editor, especially advanced users often prefer to edit it like a text file. They can use any of the text editor. You can merge templates which you have already created for this purpose for different kinds of systems, and you should reach the profile which will suit what you want to have as the system. If you want to start with the manual editing and do not know what to do yet, it might be interesting for you really to experiment with the AutoYaST editor, which was on the previous slide, and save the file again and see what the difference between the two files are. This way you will learn how the changes are reflected in the AutoYaST profile. On the next slide, I have the smallest possible AutoYaST profile. It configures only one thing, and that is the root password, nothing else. And yes, you can use even this AutoYaST profile in order to install a system. The question is, what happens with the other areas of the system configuration? You do not specify bootloader. Will it boot?
Well, it will take the default options.
Exactly. For all the parts of the configuration which are necessary for the installation, bootloader, partitioning disk, selecting packages, AutoYaST takes the defaults and uses them for the installation, and only for those where you provide the respective sections in the XML file, it will use the settings which you specify. So this means that you really do not need to describe the whole system, only the parts where you cannot stick with the default. Anyway, let's assume that you have the clone of your machine, and yeah, you may need to change something. So what you need to change in most cases, maybe the software selection on the first try. For many users, adjusting the patterns is sufficient. But if you want to fine-tune the software you install, you can do it on the package level as well. And second part, which is usually needed, is about the disk partitioning. You may want to specify that you need a dedicated data partition for your database, for example, or that you need a huge home partition for homes of your users, depending on the use case of your server. So this is something that you can specify here. And with AutoYaST, you have the flexibility that you can use the absolute size of the disk partitions to create. You can say that the partition should have the size 40 specific % of the disk, or the rest of the disk what's not used by the other already created or already configured partition. One good reminder: if you start with profile cloned from other system, there may be settings which are specific per system and you do not want to replicate, so be sure to remove them from your profile. Most typical case, you don't want all servers in your farm to have the same host name, for example. Okay, so you have an AutoYaST profile, so what to do with it? Store it to somewhere the installer can reach it, which means virtually the same as where you store the installation media, and point AutoYaST to it. So append to the kernel parameters the install parameter pointing to the DVD we put to the install server in previous step, and the AutoYaST2 parameter pointing AutoYaST to the profile and also starting the AutoYaST workflow. The AutoYaST2 option is new in /12. There is also option which is called just AutoYaST. Behaves almost the same. The only difference is that the AutoYaST2 option also configures network for you automatically. So you start the auto installation this way, and if you are lucky, if the profile is correct, some minutes later you come to the system and can start using it. Yes?
What does that mean if you use the AutoYaST? Because sometimes when you use originally when you used the AutoYaST and you had your networking, it would seem like you had to do it kind of double almost, or during the installation.
You need to, well, the problem is that you need network in order to fetch the AutoYaST profile if it's on network. Of course, if you have it on a USB stick, you don't need network. But if it's on a remote server, you need a network in order to fetch the profile. So that's why, in my opinion, the best thing you can do is to use the AutoYaST2 option, which will, if it's possible with the HCP configured network automatically, it will then fetch the AutoYaST profile, and if the AutoYaST profile contains network configuration, it will apply the one from the AutoYaST profile.
Yeah, Yoshi is right. So in the past there was AutoYaST. In the past there was the AutoYaST option, and you had to specify manually network equals DHCP, so your network is set up using DHCP. So if you just want AutoYaST or the installation to do that on their own, you can use this new option AutoYaST2, and that will do the right thing. It will use DHCP to bring up your network. So it's always safe to use that option, and you can still use the old one, but that's not that convenient.
Okay.
So when you're doing this, if you're use your network IPs and host IP.
Yes, you can.
Have it read profile and reconfigure your network on the fly.
Yes.
Might be just a coincidence, but I've always just been using AutoYaST also for specify TA and SP1 and SP2.
I would need to check it. Sorry. Well, there is one more issue. If you specify the install as a remote repository, then it's on its own is a reason to fire up network. So the difference would apply if you install from a DVD, of course. Okay, so we are slowly running out of time, so let's move forward. The next thing I want to talk about is automatically booting via network, because you can avoid the DVD. Currently, most of the hardware of most of the network cards offer the PXE, which is functionality which allows the firmware when booting to configure network according to DHCP, download bootloader from network kernel, initrd, and then boot the system. This is something that can automate installation of the system to the level that all you need to is to switch the system on. To set up the booting server, first thing which you need to do is to find out what you really need, because not only you have various architectures, but for x86 you may need to boot legacy. If it's older hardware, you may need to boot UEFI. If it's newer hardware, in some cases you may even need secure boot. So for every of this case, the setup would look slightly different. So because of this, I do not go too much into the details. So the thing which you need to do is to find out what exactly you need and then install the respective packages. Just a note to the list: the xinetd is only needed on SLE 11, and the bootloader here means the bootloader which you will use to boot the machines over networks, and it may be ISO Linux, it may be grub, the old one, it may be grub 2. It really depends on what exactly you need. The next thing which you need to do is to copy to your system the kernel and initrd of the installation media which you will boot. Here on the slides you can see the location of the files for x86-64. For other architectures it should look very similarly. Then you need to configure a TFTP server, which is a server TFTP stands for Trivial FTP, and it's a protocol which the firmware of the network cards can talk, and via this protocol it will download all the files which are necessary. Again, we have a YaST module which will help you with setting up the TFTP server. And the last thing is to configure a DHCP server, where I want to stress the next server and file name options. So the next server is IP address of the TFTP server, and the file name is the file name on the TFTP server which the firmware of the network card will then download and execute. The allow booting and allow bootp options are same in all cases. And yeah, if you have different hardware architectures or different boot architectures, then you may need to find out based on your environment how to assure that every server gets the right file with the bootloader. So I could go much more into details and pick one of the scenarios, but I would fail to cover the other ones. So that's why I simply prepared this part very shortly. And the last part about AutoYaST which I want to talk about is upgrade with AutoYaST. So far we talked about installing new system with AutoYaST. but some years ago I had a conversation with one of our customers who had the problem that he had hundreds or thousands of servers running. At that point of time it was /10 service pack something, and he wanted to bring them to /11, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 11. So as an outcome of this conversation, we introduced an upgrade mode in AutoYaST for SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 11, either SP2 or SP3, I don't remember anymore. So what it can do? It can help you upgrade system from 11 to 12, or it can also upgrade the system between individual service pack levels. Here I refer to SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 12. However, the same is valid for one version before, so you can upgrade it from 10 to 11 if it's still interesting for you. In general, you can upgrade from any system to other one if it's supported to do it via manual AutoYaST, via manual YaST. You can do it via AutoYaST2. There are two ways to trigger upgrade via AutoYaST. Or you always need the auto upgrade equals one option, and then either you specify the path to the auto upgrade profile the same way as for auto installation, or you just leave the profile in the root of the system. For the upgrade, we had to introduce some new options which are related to 4 groups: upgrade, software, networking. Networking is not entirely new, and backup. So I will quickly look through all of them. The first one, only installed packages, defines whether you really just want to upgrade the packages, which is typically what you do when you upgrade between service packs, or whether you want the system to look more like a fresh installed system, which will also assure that the basic system patterns will be installed. For this option, true is, if you are doing manual installation, then true is default. If you are upgrading from previous service pack, false would be default if you are upgrading from previous major version. But this gives you the option to override the default. Then stop on solver conflict. Does everybody know what solver means? Yeah, so the solver means the solver is the part of the system which evaluates which packages should be installed or upgraded in order to satisfy all the RPM dependencies. And sometimes it, or we hope that almost always it works out of the box. But especially if you are using software which does not come from our distribution, you may need some manual interaction. For example, remove package which requires old library, which is not part of the new version of the system. So this defines the behavior. Either you can ignore the problem, or you should, the auto upgrade process should stop. I personally recommend the latter. Then for the software, it needs to provide some more options than when you are only installing. In order to list packages and patterns to install, you also may want to remove some of them, so you can list them here. And this actually is a way how to give the AutoYaST information how to tackle the situation which would lead to conflict. So for example, if you have a third-party package which cannot work anymore in the new version, this way you can tell that it should be removed. Otherwise, a conflict would be shown to you as user. The next one is about networking. The keep install network tells you what to do. You have the same sound as I do. The first one tells you what to do with the network used during the auto installation itself, set by Linux RC. And actually the other one is not relevant anymore in the recent versions. And the last one is about backup. YaST can back up the sysconfig settings as well as files which configuration files coming from RPM packages which were modified since they were installed. And you can wipe the old updates as well from previous upgrades. And besides of that, you can put in most of the sections of the AutoYaST profile you can use for installation. So as part of AutoYaST upgrade, you can additionally to the upgrade configure, for example, a web server. You had a question?
Yeah, where are these updates stored? Where are these, the backups, where are they saved?
Somewhere in under the var tree. I don't remember the exact path. I would need to look it up. Was there another question? Okay. So next step is to boot the AutoYaST upgrade, which you do via the options which I set earlier. So put the auto upgrade equals 1 option, and if you are lucky, you go through this step. If you are not lucky, the packages section will show a red line stating something about package conflicts. But at this point of time, you can enter the package selector and do adjustments to resolve the conflicts. They simply happen. You cannot do anything about it. But AutoYaST upgrade has one nice feature. If you resolve them in the previous string, it will record all the changes which you did to the package selection, so that you decided to solve the conflict, this package should be removed. It will record it and put it back to the AutoYaST profile. So after the auto upgrade is done, you can fetch from the root home of the system a profile which will include all these changes which you had to do manually. So if you have multiple identical systems, the next one, for the next one you can use the updated profile. And if you are lucky, if the system is really identical, you should not run into the dependency conflict anymore. Yes?
So when you have thousands of servers and you have, let's say, SUSE Manager to deploy this, would you still go and use AutoYaST upgrade, or why don't you use SUSE Manager to?
Honestly, if I had SUSE Manager to manage my systems, I would stick with SUSE Manager. Okay, so this is the end about upgrading the system, and we have only one question. Is there anything else we can do? We can tell you to upgrade your knowledge?
Yeah, so thank you so much for attending the session.